Hey, what does Jesus, a video game, and mental health have to do with each other? Check this video out, find out. Hey, thanks so much for joining us on YouTube. My name is Jack. If this is your first time here, follow the instructions on the screen. We want to send you a gift for saying thanks. You know what? I love video games. One of my favorite games that I recently played is this game called Superliminal. If you have an Xbox, you can go right now on Game Pass to download it for free. It's a really, really awesome game. It's a puzzle game. And the whole game actually kind of takes place in this facility where you're trying to go around and solve puzzles. But the thing that's really unique about this game is the whole game is about perspective. For example, you pick up objects and you move them around, but depending on where you pick them up, they change in size. You know, it's the idea of you've got a phone, for example, right? And from here, it just looks like a normal size, but if you hold it up close, it looks giant. That's exactly how it works in the game. But perspective is a major theme in the game. And really the game is actually kind of about our mental health and having the right perspective. And the reason I bring this up, because I think it's so important for us to think about our perspective. And here's why. It's because our thought life, the negative thoughts that go in and out of our head, they can put us in a really bad space. And I'm talking about these negative thoughts that just say that, you know what, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I should be ashamed of this, I'm not smart enough, skilled enough, pretty enough, whatever enough. And these negative thoughts come in and out of our minds, and sometimes they sit with us for a really long time, and sometimes they're in and out throughout the day. But it's such an important thing to think about. And we even talked a little bit last time in this message above about where these thoughts come from. And the short answer is sin. Sin is part of our life, that we disobeyed God and the life that He wanted to have for us. And because of that, because we chose our own way, our own selfish way, sin entered the world, and all of this hurt and negativity entered into reality. And that's just not only in our interpersonal relationships, but even within our own thought life. And we talked about Satan, the father of lies. That's what Jesus called him, giving us lies, and we just tend to listen to them and let them kind of spinning around in our head. And Satan is trying to pull us away from what God wants for us and for our life. So how do we fix it? Well, the Bible tells us a little bit about that and kind of what that looks like. And I want us to look at a passage in the book of 2 Corinthians. Paul, whose life was changed by Jesus, writes to a church, and he says this in 2 Corinthians 10:3-5. He says, "For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, we have the divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretense that set itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ." Paul says that this war that we're fighting, it's not a war that we see in the world. It's a battle against spiritual forces, and it's a battle even within our own mind. And at the end of the passage, Paul says to take every captive thought and make it obedient to Christ. We have to capture the thought, and then we have to make it obedient to Christ, meaning we have to center ourselves and our thoughts to Jesus. So how do we actually do that? How do we practice taking our thoughts and making them captive and then pointing them to Jesus? Well, one way that we can do that is the idea of reframing. So reframing is just the simple idea of re-examining a situation through a new lens or through a new filter, a new perspective. Let me give you a really great example from the Bible. Paul, the guy that wrote this letter earlier, he was sent to jail for preaching about Jesus, right? He gets sent to jail and they still allow him to write. And so he's writing, and this is what he says. He's writing to a different church in the letter to to the Philippians, he says this. He says, "Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it's been clear throughout the whole palace garden to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear." Right? Paul takes a bad situation, being locked up in jail, and kind of looks at it from a different perspective. He says, you know what, actually, this has been really awesome that I'm in chains because I was in chains, these other people came to know and trust in Jesus. And we all have the ability to look at situations, to look at experiences, to look at the thoughts that come into our mind, and to see them from a new perspective, a new lens. And I want to give you 3 ways that you can practice reframing your negative thoughts. The first thing is fact checking. That's right, you got to check the facts. You know, we have this idea in our head that, you know, we're just not smart enough. And you know what, if we actually check the facts, you know, maybe we did bad on a couple of tests, but when we really think back and remember, it wasn't that we didn't know the material, it's just we got horrible sleep the night before, or we were just, someone said something really awful to us and it just put us in a mood and we couldn't stop thinking about what that person said. And so we did bad on this test. It wasn't that we weren't smart enough. It was just, there was other circumstances involved. Like we have to check the thoughts that come into our head and to figure out if they're actually true, if they're really true, and even fact checking them against what God says about us. Right? That's one of the key ways that we can reframe those negative thoughts, those negative experiences, by fact checking them to what's actually true. The second thing is looking back throughout history. You know, well, that was one thing that was really helpful for me during this whole pandemic and COVID stuff. Like when I look back at history, I go, man, like we made it through like world wars and depressions and other pandemics. I go, we're gonna get through this. And even in some of those other circumstances, like people became stronger because of it. And so when I look back through history, when I look at Jesus, when I look at the entirety of the gospel, I go, man, okay, my situation, it stinks and it doesn't feel good right now. And I don't like these thoughts that are coming into my head. But in the grand scope of history, I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna be okay. And here's the third thing that I think will help you reframe those negative thoughts is asking the question, what would I tell a friend? Like if my friend came up to me and had the same negative thoughts that I had, what would I be telling them? What advice would I be giving them? There's this funny thing called the Solomon's paradox. If you've ever read the Bible, Solomon, one of the wisest guys in the whole wide world, Bible talks about him being one of the wisest people. People would come to him and seek his advice. But Solomon didn't listen to his own advice. In fact, you see him kind of fall away from God and disobeying some of the things that God clearly said for him not to do. And that Solomon's paradox is true of all of us, isn't it? That we're much more likely to give advice to other people than we are to listen to our own advice. So take a step back, zoom out of the picture, and just imagine what you would be telling a friend that is thinking these negative thoughts. What would you be telling them? And then like reverse places and actually listen to the advice that you would tell a friend. And I think one of the most powerful things that we can do when we think about reframing is just thinking like, you know, in light of the cross, in light of what Jesus has done, in light of eternity in heaven with Jesus, man, this negative experience, this negative thing, these negative thoughts, like they kind of get washed away because I'm able to see the bigger picture, to zoom out, to see what Jesus says of me. And when I reframe it, man, my outlook, my thought life, my behavior, my action, my love of Jesus and other people radically changes because I took the time and did the hard work to capture that thought and make it obedient to Christ. So I challenge you today to work on one of those things. Work on one of those things. Think about a negative thought that's come into your head today and figure out one of those ways to help put it in the right perspective and to really listen to the truth. Thanks so much. Hey, we're so glad you found the Doxology Youth channel. If you would, hit that subscribe button, like this video, put a comment, tell us what you thought of the video. We are so thankful that you decided to jump in and watch this video all the way to the very, very end. You're incredible. Keep up the good work.